What's going on, YouTube family? Second day in a row that I am doing a live stream. Let me see if I can pull up the chat here. What I really need to do is talk to my son, who is very savvy when it comes to doing live streams, especially on YouTube. He's got his own YouTube channel, and he knows this software for live streaming inside out. Just want to see if I can find the chat. If not, no big deal. Let's see. I don't see it. Popped up yesterday very easily, but today I don't see the chat. Anyway, all good. Would have been nice to interact with you guys a little bit, but it is what it is. So anyway, what is the topic for today's live stream? So the topic for today's live stream is I want to talk to you guys about some of the different things that you can do to speak with confidence and conviction. And so what I boiled down this art of communication that I've been studying really since, really it started when I was a teenager, right? I grew up as an only child and always wanted to make friends. And so I figured out that if I could make people laugh, I could get their attention and I could get them to like me, and then I could build friendships and relationships. And so at first, a lot of the things that I was doing with communication were kind of unconscious. But then as I got older, I realized that really the only somewhat of a skill set I've ever had is communication. And so the only jobs I was ever good at were jobs that involved communication. They were also the only jobs I really ever enjoyed doing, was dealing with people, communicating with people. And so as I grew up and became an adult, I was like, well, what would happen if I actually studied this stuff and learned how does it really work? So take it from being an unconscious thing to a more of a conscious thing, and just read tons of books on influence, persuasion, salesmanship, human psychology, human behavior, human nature. And so that really led me on this 25-year learning journey of how to improve communication skills and how to communicate efficiently and effectively with people to get ahead in business and in life. And so really I can distill it down to three things. If you have these three things, which I actually talked about in an earlier video, right? You're an effective communicator, right? You do them really well, you become a master communicator. And these three things are clarity, confidence, and conviction. And so clarity is really just about getting clear on what it is that you want your message to achieve. What's the end result that you want to happen after you've communicated whatever you're going to communicate? So do you want to influence people to think a certain way, to behave a certain way? Do you want them to perceive something a certain way? Do you want to change their perspective on something? Do you want to elicit an emotion of some sort in them? Maybe you just want to make them laugh. But I think it's very important to be clear on what the end result is that you're shooting for when you're communicating with people. You also need to be clear on what it is that you're going to say, right? And again, I get deeper into this in another video, and this could be a whole training in and of itself, but really clarity is just about getting clear on the result, getting clear on what you're going to say and what you are saying, and getting clear on who you're speaking to, right? And then confidence and conviction. Confidence is more about the way you speak and what you do both verbally and non-verbally with your body language when you communicate. And then conviction is a blend of those two things. So when you're super clear and you're super confident when you communicate, that morphs into this thing called conviction. And conviction is when you are communicating in a flow state where you're saying all the right things at the right time, and you're saying them in the right way, and you are just communicating masterfully. And so today, what I want to talk to you about are some things that you can add to your messages that will add to your confidence level or will add to the perception of your confidence level, right? And then the byproduct of that is that you are communicating with conviction, right? And so the first thing that I want to talk to you about today is tonality. So the way I want you to think about this is like your tone is like a map. We've all heard speakers who speak in a dull, same sounding, monotone type of voice. To engage your listeners, you need to put some passion and enthusiasm into your voice. The voice throughout your speech should be like a topographical map, some highs and some lows based on the information you're offering or the place you are in your story. And so I talked about this yesterday in the storytelling video, and that is this concept that when you communicate with someone with the intention of persuading them or making an impact on them, in many cases you're like overtly telling a story, but sometimes you're covertly telling a story, meaning you're communicating with them, but that person is developing a storyline in their head, right? They're storyizing through visuals and through their imagination what you're communicating to them. And so if you think about it in terms of a story or an effective message, like the best stories, the best movies, the best books, the message isn't communicated in a straight line the same way throughout the entire process, because if that happened, it would be extremely boring and you would lose people, right? And so there's times of shock, there's times of awe, there's times when things are loud, there's times when things are quiet, there's times when there's excitement, there's times when there's sadness, right? And so you need to be able to impart those same types of feelings in people when you communicate with them. And since you don't have all the visuals and all the resources and all the things that Hollywood uses, like all the tricks that Hollywood uses to do those things, right, to achieve those things, you have to rely on your voice and your tonality. And so I think one of the things that holds people back from being really effective communicators is most of the time they're lacking one of those three things. They're either not clear, they're not confident, or they don't speak with conviction. Sometimes people solve the clarity issue. Like they know exactly what they want to say and they might have a lot of knowledge on a topic, but when they communicate, they fall flat because they're communicating in this monotone style. And so basically what they do is bore people because the message itself is not interesting, right? So you have to think of your tonality, again, as kind of like this map where there's ups and downs, there's highs, there's lows, there's peaks, there's valleys, there's twists, there's turns, and your tonality is going to dictate how those things are perceived by your listeners. Second thing is you want to fill the room. When you're authentic and when you have a presence of authority, those characteristics flow from your voice. So don't be afraid to project and fill the room with your presence. I'll tell you something. Many of you might know that I have tons of courses on communication skills. And so I used to record my courses where I would stand in front of a whiteboard and I would visually demonstrate the point that I was trying to make. And I kind of switched gears on that a while ago only because it's a painstaking process to educate people in that fashion. It's tough because number one, you're using like a DSLR type of camera, you're shooting in 1080p, and so you have to now take those videos, you have to get them off the camera, you have to get them onto the computer. Lots of times you have to compress them because the files might be too large, they take up too much space on people's computers, and it's just a process, right? And more people, I would say within the last 10 years, just started educating using PowerPoint, Keynote, or Google slide presentations and just kind of a screen recorder where they're in front of the microphone like I am now and they're just kind of going through the slides. And so I shifted to that a while ago because it was way more efficient for me. Like I could crank out way more material doing that. What I noticed was that if I recorded products where my face is not on the screen like it is now, they didn't they weren't delivered nearly as well as they were when I was on the screen. And I think the reason for that is because when I'm on the screen, I feel like I'm actually having a conversation with someone. And so I remember to sit upright. I remember to fix my posture. I remember to smile. I remember to communicate as if I'm actually talking to someone. Whereas when I didn't have the camera on, I might find myself in a situation where I start slouching and I start talking lower and all of that stuff, even though people don't see it, right? You would think it's mainly just auditory, they pick up on it, right? And that's because, just like I'm saying here, when you're authentic and you have a presence of authority, those characteristics need to flow from your voice, right? The next thing you want to do is strive for voice improvement. So not everyone's going to have like a radio quality voice, but anyone can improve their voice by practicing. One exercise I like to do is hum. And then halfway through, I start speaking and I'll start to get a feeling for how to improve my voice quality so that it has more resonance. The second thing is, and again, I talked about this in an earlier video, is that people ask me, like, where does confidence come from? And for me, like, the very short answer is confidence comes from competence. And competence comes from just knowing what you're talking about, whatever it might be, right? When you have a deep knowledge on a particular topic or subject, maybe because you've done it a million times, you've put in the time, you have the reps, and you just, it's something that you know inside out, you're always going to communicate about that topic in a more confident way than when you talk about something that you really don't understand or know. And so when you're in a situation where you have to talk about something that you really don't know or understand, you're always going to lack confidence, right? And so the key is finding, what I would say is, like, because the objective is to communicate with clarity, confidence, and conviction all the time, right? But the reality is, like, you're going to have more confidence when you talk about things you know about and less confidence when you talk about things you don't know about, but you don't ever want to appear as unconfident, right? Or not confident. And so what do you do when you're in a situation when you're communicating about something that you really don't know about? Is I try to focus on, okay, this might not be an area of expertise for me, but maybe there is something within this that I do have a specialized knowledge on, or that I do know something about, or maybe there's a parallel between this and something else that I do know about, and so I'll draw an analogy to the thing that I do know about, right? And so, like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is something that I've been doing for over 10 years, and I've been teaching it for probably 8 years to kids between 6 and 12 years old. And so I have a very deep knowledge on that topic. And so lots of times I'll just draw parallels. Like, if I'm in a situation where I have to talk about something that I'm not really an expert on, I'll try to find parallels or similarities to that so that I can talk about something that I do know about and I have confidence, okay? So that's like what do you do if you're in a situation where you're talking about something that's really not your area of expertise. But in reality, you should, if you really want to communicate with confidence, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to know your subject matter inside out. And if you don't, sometimes, depending on the context, environment, or situation, sometimes it's just best to own up to it and say, look, that's really not my area of expertise. That's outside my scope of unique ability, and I can this person might be a better person to help you answer that question. The next thing you want to pay attention to is your pace. So the pace of your voice is really the speed at which you're communicating. So first, let's talk about natural pacing. When you're making a presentation to just one person or a group of people, it's important to get a sense of their natural pace of speaking. So there's a huge difference from region to region in terms of, like, people's natural speaking pace from country to country. This is true as well. But to establish rapport, you want to do what the Romans do. And so, like, one thing that will immediately jump out to me if I'm communicating with somebody and they're communicating at a different pace than I am, I know right away there's a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect there, and I need to either slow down or speed up, but I need to try to match their vocal pace, because this is one of those things where you might be communicating with somebody and you know that something's off, like maybe you're getting like a weird vibe from them, or you're just like, you feel like the energy isn't there, but you can't put your finger on what it is. It's that their pace and your pace are not aligned with each other. Most established speakers know that their pace should be similar to a conversation they're having with someone over dinner. That's pretty much the standard that I go with. Like, even when I coach people to create online marketing campaigns that are mainly in the written word through long form sales letters or video sales letters, I still have them write and articulate the message as if they were having a conversation with someone over a beer or over dinner or over coffee or something like that. Brian Stevenson, a well-known TED speaker, speaks at a little over 190 a minute. The famous Tony Robbins speaks at a high energy 240 words per minute. Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State during the Nixon administration, was a brilliant man but an incredibly boring speaker who spoke at a snail's pace of 90 words per minute. Again, you want to be at that conversational pace. Like, how would you be speaking if you were delivering this message through a conversation? Next is the pause for emphasis. So don't be afraid to pause from time to time. Most people who speak very quickly can appear like they're not confident, right? A pace that's too fast is associated with a burst of adrenaline, so you might appear nervous instead of confident, like Tony Robbins. When you pause, it seems like a long time, but for the listeners, appropriate pauses help them assimilate what you're saying so they can anticipate what you'll say next. This is a very important one, because sometimes what could happen is, if you're going too fast, you say something, the person doesn't quite catch it in time, so they're trying to figure out or remember what it is that you said, and then you're moving on to the next thing, and so now they're not paying attention to everything else because they're still hung up on what you said before. And when that happens, you lose people, the message becomes confusing, it becomes diluted, and it has a terrible effect on the perception of your confidence and conviction. And that is never a good thing. Next is the volume. So volume is pretty self-explanatory. It's the volume at which you're speaking. I'm a New Yorker. New Yorkers, generally speaking, speak louder than other people. This is true of lots of different cultures, but you need to be aware and cognizant of it. So the volume you use when speaking makes a great deal of difference in the perception of your talk. If you talk too quietly, people will think you're afraid. You're going to appear as small and shriveled and afraid of the world, and that's obviously the opposite of confidence. But if you're overpowering, you come off too strong and you turn people off. So what you want to do is get an optimal volume before you reach overpowering, right? Because sometimes that can be a fine line. So a speaker who's speaking at an adequate level can be heard by the audience, but only if the listeners are paying careful, focused attention. There's quite a bit of difference between adequate volume and optimal volume. At the optimal level, your audience can easily hear and understand every confident word that you say. Now, look, if I'm giving a presentation in a room full of people, whether it's 10 people or 10,000 people, the first thing I'll do is I'll ask, can everyone hear me okay? Right? Now, if I'm in a room full of 10,000 people, I'm going to be mic'd up, and hopefully the tech team did their job the right way, so that shouldn't be an issue. But I have given presentations in rooms with, let's say, 30 people in it, and I might be mic'd up or I might not be mic'd up, but in those situations, if the mic doesn't work, I want to know that, right? And most of the time, I can still deliver the presentation without a mic. If I'm in a room of, let's say, 30 people, and the room is maybe, 500 square feet, I'm just using that, but the people are within range, most of the time, I can deliver it without a mic, because I will ask first if everyone can hear me, and then I will speak almost as if I'm speaking now, maybe a tad bit louder to make sure that my volume is optimal. And then the last thing, which might not seem so obvious to you, is your breathing. So your breathing can have like a very big impact on the way that you communicate. And the reason why is because when you speak, you're letting air out, right? At least that's like the natural flow of the way things work, right? And so if you're speaking too fast, or you're too loud, or you're too excited, what happens is you can't get oxygen in your body fast enough. And so now that comes through in your voice, and your voice will become higher pitched, and you might actually shriek a little bit, and you're going to sound like you're out of breath. And again, this is, if it's done whether you do it on a very small level or a big level, like where you really sound like you're out of breath, right? And you can't catch your breath. People pick up on that. Okay, they're going to pick up on it if it's a drastic situation, but they're also going to pick up on it even in smaller contexts. They might not consciously pick up on it. They might not say to themselves consciously, this person sounds like they're out of breath. This person sounds nervous. This person sounds excited. This person sounds anxious. This person doesn't sound confident. It doesn't work that way most of the time. Most of the time, it's going to happen on a completely subconscious level, where that reptilian part of the brain, that ancient part of the brain, is just going to pick up on the fact that something is off with the way you're communicating with them. So a measured pace of breathing is good so that you can speak clearly and project from your diaphragm for resonance. That's very important to a successful speaking style. Posture also affects your breathing. Posture makes a huge difference in how effectively you're breathing as you're giving a speech. If you're standing straight and tall and breathing deeply, your voice is going to have more richness and more confidence. Again, that's why I find that even if I'm recording a course or something like this, where I don't have to be on camera, I do it anyway because it forces me to keep my posture correct. And then lastly is speak on the on breath, or speak on breath, I should say. That means you take in your full breath as you begin to speak. You should have enough air to get through your full sentence and take in a full breath before you make the next sentence or before you begin the next sentence. That will prevent that situation where it's like you can't get the words out fast enough and you are appearing as if you are nervous or anxious about something. So hope you guys got some value out of this. What I will do is I will put a link to my PDF, the Persuasion Power Levers. These are 6 attributes that I've discovered over the past 25 years that make people more persuasive. It's very unique in that the way that I describe these things, I've never heard anybody else combine them or talk about them in this context. And what I have found is that the more of these attributes you have and get better at, the more persuasive you are. And the less of them you have, the less persuasive you are. And like I said, I'll hook you up with that, give you guys that absolutely free. I will put it in the description, and I will see you on the next stream. Have a great day.